The House Elections Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cerniglia.
Here.
Representatives Wagella.
Here.
Pope.
Here.
Polazar.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Smith.
Present.
DeBoyer.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Smith makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the October 10, 2023 meeting. Without objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony on House Bills 5141 through 5145. The Elections Committee will go at ease at the call of the chair.
The Elections Committee will come back to order. We will now have testimony from Representatives Cerniglia, Arbit, and Bierlen on the artificial intelligence in elections legislation, which consists of House Bills 5141 and through 5145.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wagella. And thank you for joining me here today, Representative Bierlein and Representative Arbit. We are here to testify on a bipartisan package of bills regarding artificial intelligence in elections. Artificial intelligence is here, and the technology is available to anyone who can access the internet. As it continues to expand and a presidential election rapidly approaches, we have a duty to protect our elections and our democracy from misinformation and outright forgeries. AI-generated content is currently indistinguishable from real-life images and sounds. The threat of AI-generated content to influence and deeply impact elections and voters is imminent. Michigan can take the lead in regulating misleading election-related content and protecting democracy. This bill package does exactly that. And in fact, we don't seek to prohibit the use of AI in election-related materials. We simply require that those creating or pushing out AI images, audio, and video use appropriate disclaimers, particularly in relation to deepfakes. May I have permission to show a PowerPoint and presentation?
Absolutely.
Thank you. May we see the presentation? Thank you. Deepfakes, AI-generated images, audio, and video have all become increasingly popular over the last couple years. Many of these technologies continue to blossom, with some AI-generated audio clips and images being nearly impossible to detect as fakes. Here are some examples. Recently, AI-generated images were used alongside real images in a campaign advertisement targeted at former President Donald Trump. As seen here, these images appear to show former President Trump affectionately holding Dr. Fauci, something that did not actually happen. Additionally, here's another example. In addition to images that can be used within a campaign advertisements, there is also an increasing concern that entire videos can be created using a voice and face that is identical or nearly identical to a specific person. Just last week, one of the world's most famous YouTube personalities, Mr. Beast, who has over 200 million subscribers on YouTube, was victim to an attempted scam via a deep fake video, which can be seen below. Can we show that video? Oh, thank you.
If you're watching this video, you're one of the 10,000 lucky people who'll get an iPhone 15 Pro for just $2. I'm Mr. Beast, and I'm doing the world's largest iPhone 15 giveaway. Click the link below to claim yours now.
So it turns out Mr. Beast didn't actually do that video. That's not him. If you click that link, something bad probably happened. You did not get a free iPhone. So that's just one of the better examples out there. This video below highlights some of the dangers of AI and deepfakes, and this is already 2 years old. Since then, technology has only progressed in the AI universe.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
It looks like Morgan Freeman, sounds like Morgan Freeman. Probably most people have seen Morgan Freeman at some point. So that's another example. Finally, we throw it over to an AI version of President Biden congratulating Rep. Cerniglu, myself, on the introduction of these bills. And this audio took approximately 3 minutes to make.
Hi, Representative Cerniglu. It's your buddy Joe. I really like your bill that requires disclaimers on political ads that use artificial intelligence. No more malarkey. As my dad used to say, Joey, you can't believe everything you hear. Not a joke. Anyway, thank you and your committee for your leadership in the drive for more democratic elections. And give your daughter a hug for me. By the way, this statement was created using artificial intelligence.
Might be the end. Let's see if there's anything else there. Okay, so those were just some examples, and obviously some of them were not campaign examples, but just some examples of how far this technology has come, and why it might be important for us to tackle this before we have more elections. So I'm just going to go through kind of some of the basics of this legislation, and then I will turn it over to my colleagues, Representative Bierlein and Arbit, to talk about their own bills and the package in general. So House Bill 5141 addresses disclaimers on artificial intelligence. If a person, committee, or other entity creates, publishes, or originally distributes a qualified political advertisement, they must include in a clear and conspicuous manner a statement that meets all of the following requirements. Was generated in whole or in part by AI. If text or graphic, the disclaimer must appear in letters at least as large as the majority of the communication. If audio, it must be spoken in a clearly audible and intelligible manner at the beginning and end and last at least 3 seconds. If it's a video with audio, we have to have 4 seconds in letters as large as the majority of the text. If no text, then a size readable by an average viewer, and spoken at the beginning and the end for 3 seconds. There are some penalties for violation. And also, if it is a non-qualified political ad, actually, let me first give you the definition of a qualified political advertisement. So that is any advertisement like a search engine marketing, display ads, video ads, native ads, sponsorships, including a candidate for federal, state, or local office, or a ballot question that contains any image, audio, or video generated in whole or in part by AI and is made by or on behalf of a candidate committee. So that would be qualified political advertisements. For non-qualified political advertisements that reference elections, candidates, or ballot questions, you still have to have a disclaimer, but the penalties are not the same. And then I'm going to share some of the exceptions. So it does not apply to a news broadcast if it clearly acknowledges that the material deceptive media does not accurately represent the speech or conduct of the depicted individual, a radio or TV station paid to broadcast the ad, or if the qualified political advertisement is a satire or parody. So like if it's Saturday Night Live or something that people clearly know is a satire. Let's see. Then we have the HB 5142 is a sentencing guideline companion. HB 5143 is the definition of artificial intelligence, which is Representative Bierlein's bill, and I will request that my colleague address that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wagula and members of this committee for letting us testify in support of our bill package this morning. As you've heard from the others, from Rep. Cerniglu of this package, AI is a rapidly evolving technology, and as we go forward, it's going to have an even greater impact on our election process and how people consume political information leading up to elections. My bill, House Bill 5143, contains the definition portions of the package. The definition of artificial intelligence is provided to accurately capture the essence of AI systems that are increasingly being used in various domains. By defining AI as a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments, the bill lays the foundation for clear and effective regulation of AI technologies. In an era where AI is becoming an integral part of our lives, it is crucial to have a legal framework that addresses its impacts and potential risks. And I'm proud to be part of this package and wanted to thank Chair Cerniglu for her efforts in addressing these emerging challenges related to artificial intelligence and enhancing transparency in our election process in the state of Michigan. The bills are a win for voters and a win for the integrity of our process. If we don't establish a clear framework now, we're going to be playing catch up later. And just so you're aware, that the definition for AI came from the U.S. State Department. It's the definition they use, so it's in line with federal things.
Thank you, Representative Bierlein. I'm going to now cover HB 5144. This addresses deepfakes specifically and similar content. A person shall not distribute or enter into an agreement to distribute materially deceptive media if the person knows whether the media falsely represents a depicted individual. Distribution occurs 90 days before an election. The person intends the distribution to harm the reputation or electoral prospects of a candidate in an election, and the distribution is reasonably likely to cause that result. And the person intends the distribution to change the voting behavior of electors because they believe the depicted individual actually did or said what was depicted, and that is a reasonable result. So this is when someone wants to influence the election and harm the other candidate by creating something that is misleading. There are exclusions. If a disclaimer is included stating that it was manipulated by technical means and did not occur. So you can still do any of this, you just have to have a disclaimer. It must appear throughout the video if it's a video. It must be clearly visible and readable, and in letters at least as large as text or as the text of the item, like the video or image, or easily readable to the average viewer. If it's audio, it must be read at the beginning and end in a pitch that can be heard by the average listener. And there are penalties, and the standard is clear. It must be clear and convincing that the person or entity knew that it was false and that it would have these results. And that's the basic outline of all of these bills. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Arbit, and then after that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have on the package. And we will also have, after our testimony, we'll have an expert on AI joining us to answer any questions that we cannot answer. Thank you, Representative Arbit.
Thank you, Chair Cernoglu, Vice Chairs Wagella and Smith, and members of the committee. It's an honor to address you today on behalf of this important legislation. Like major technological shifts before it, artificial intelligence presents the world with both significant promise and severe peril. It is difficult to anticipate just how AI will impact our lives as it evolves and its applications are further identified, but it is not difficult to anticipate what our responsibility is here today. Our responsibility as legislators and stewards of the welfare of the people of this state is to craft policies and enact laws which will, to the greatest extent possible, harness the potential benefits of AI while ameliorating its threats. We have seen a severe rise in malign actors seeding disinformation and manipulating images, videos, and other media in attempts to impact voter opinion and steer election outcomes. Whether these malicious activities have swayed votes or elections is for people far smarter and more knowledgeable than me to say. But this trend is not just evident in America. Just a few weeks ago, I read an article in The Economist about how the Taiwanese presidential election has been roiled by disinformation, much of it intentionally disseminated by state actors in mainland China to discredit pro-Western, pro-democracy, and pro-American candidates. The use of artificial intelligence in developing the CCP's disinformation campaign in particular was highlighted. As you have heard and seen already, the threat of turbocharged disinformation campaigns built using AI tools is particularly frightening. We are all politicians in this room. We have all won tough elections. We have all likely had our words or actions taken out of context or used against us. It is not fun. Now imagine a scenario in which someone could take a video of you, or right now of me testifying in committee, and substitute my words about these bills for, I don't know, me talking about how I like to eat golden retriever puppies. It would be absurd, except for it's in my own voice, and my lip movements actually seem to match the words that I'm saying. So how could I refute it? Would anyone believe me? This type of deepfake video can be created easily using artificial intelligence, and these tools are only becoming more sophisticated, refined, and harder for the average person to identify. So what to do? Colleagues, our democracy is precious and fragile. We know that liberals and conservatives have very different views on how to organize our society and our economy. Despite that, we privilege our coexistence in this shared polity. Our tolerance for coexistence depends on our ability to maintain at least some fidelity to a shared reality. In a world where we cannot distinguish fact from fiction, truth from lies, our tether to reality, to one another, to our shared democracy will evaporate, leaving nothing but ruin. That is why this bipartisan legislation before you today is so urgent and so vital. This legislation will not infringe on free speech. It will not stop candidates from misrepresenting their opponents' records or from overstating their own records. What it will do is enact penalties to ensure that individuals who knowingly and wantonly disseminate false material generated by artificial intelligence and do so to gain electoral advantage are held accountable, and that others are not tempted to do the same. Artificial intelligence marks the next front in our battle to defend democracy, and I urge you to support this vital legislation, which will position Michigan as a national leader in protecting elections from AI-powered disinformation. Grateful to Chair Cernoglu and Representatives Bierlein and Puri for championing this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. We are available for questions if.
Representative Hope.
Yes, thank you for introducing this legislation. I have a question regarding enforcement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the enforcement would be through the courts. So let me find this. Let me find the, actually, I don't have the bill in front of me, but it is through the court system. You can get injunctive relief. I believe it's through the Ingham County Court or the court where someone has standing. So probably where it was created. That's outlined in the bill, kind of towards the end. So it's through our court system, because if there's any, any possibility that speech will be considered, we wanted it to be in the courts, so that they could handle that appropriately.
Representative Churches?
Thank you. I really see the value in this legislation and how it can impact our democratic process. But I did have one concern that I was hoping that you could address, and it kind of is what Representative Hope was, but I'm wondering if there is a minor who commits this, will their punishment be different? Is there a way to make sure that it kind of, I don't know, I also want to make sure we're educating our youth, because this is a new technology. So I think that younger folks may not understand the gravity of this. So I don't know if that was taken into consideration in this, of how do we inform our youth that this has real consequences, because kids' videos can get a lot of views, and that can make an impact. And one untruth, if it goes viral, it can really make an impact. And also, young minds are still developing. They're not fully developed. So I also just wondered if you've taken that into consideration. And that's just my only thing that I hesitate on. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. If you could share, I'd just be interested to know what you all think. But I really see the value in this, and it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Our goal is not to punish someone who unintentionally, may have shared something or, even created something as a joke. So in the disclaimer bill, we actually changed it to originally distribute, so that we could protect anyone who just unknowingly shares something. So the reason to have distribution is so that campaigns aren't using someone like a influencer, for example, and, perhaps paying that person to push out the content. So as far as juveniles are concerned, I think the only place they might even fall into, and I doubt that they would, even apply here, is where there's a suggestion of a civil infraction for a deep fake. But I don't see that happening as it applies to juveniles who are, it's really intended for someone who is acting maliciously on behalf of a campaign or a candidate and trying to influence the election by having a paid advertisement or, and really we are going to need to do education on the disclaimer piece. But with that said, our current campaign finance laws require things like paid for by. We have to put that on all our yard signs. We have to put that on all of our campaign literature. So that's really why we were focusing on disclaimers, so that people could continue to do that. So that's definitely a valid concern, and I think that actually might be a good question for the AI expert who will join us next. And absolutely.
Thank you. A couple months ago, I think, and I might get my facts a little bit wrong here, but I think it was Governor DeSantis' presidential campaign, came out with a promotional video in which I can't remember if it was President Trump or President Biden, but basically completely it wasn't real what was being said, but it was a deep fake. And this was noticed by the political press. I read about it, I think, in Politico, and it was noted that this was basically the first usage in an official presidential campaign. And so really, I think what this legislation is attempting to do is to say, if you're going to do that, you need to put a disclaimer on it. And if you're not going to put a disclaimer on it, you're going to be penalized because you're basically trying to deceive voters and use that. And so what we're talking about is the apparatuses behind the campaign, the consultant network that conceived of this, the network that distributed this. If you are going to be targeting Michigan voters with these type of materially false media, did I get that right? Materially false media. If that's what you're going to be doing, then and you're not going to have a disclaimer on it, materially deceptive media. Thank you. Then you're going to have to then you'll be penalized. So I think that the legislation has been crafted carefully to make sure, again, and when I first read it, I said, what I don't want to do is, have, Uncle Bob, who's, maybe he's retired and, all he's doing is being on Facebook all day. I don't want him to be, in the dragnet of the criminal justice system for, sharing, information or social media posts that came through in his feed that represent his political perspective, and frankly, maybe even his goal in terms of electoral outcomes. What we want to do is ensure that bad actors are not able to operate in the state of Michigan without clarity to the voters about what is being done and what is being shared and transmitted.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch base on the education piece, and I definitely appreciate it because we all experience it. So I think this is great legislation. Thank you so much.
Representative Burns.
Thank you, Chair Wagala. Thank you all for your testimony today and your work on this package. I think it's very important. I did want to ask, in terms of intended outcomes, I know we've talked a lot about disclaimers and kind of raising awareness for members of the public, which I think is critically important. Can you also talk to us about what you see as the path forward, assuming that these bills pass, with regard to seeing a decrease in the number of deep fakes and AI for, political purposes in general? And I'm curious if there are other states that have passed similar legislation, if there is data or any trend analysis that just shows that impact. So if you have any information on that, I would appreciate it.
So I believe Texas, Minnesota, California, and Washington have passed some legislation to curb the use of AI during elections. I know there's some federal legislation pending right now, but it's a very new space, so there's not a lot that has been done yet. So we really are looking to be leaders here in Michigan on this because it's an emerging technology that continues to grow every day. Like all laws, our goal is that it will curb the use of this, and I believe that it will. There's still going to be bad actors that are going to try to find ways around this, but right now there's nothing. There's nothing prohibiting them or penalizing them from maliciously creating these videos of any one of us and completely destroying our electoral prospects. So I do believe it will certainly be helpful. And as we work through this new space, I'm sure that as we go forward, there will be changes that need to be made as the technology continues to evolve.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here to testify on behalf of your bills. And yes, we are treading very new waters with all of this of the AI and technology. And a couple of things on 5141 and 5144 include injunctive relief for either the Attorney General or the injured candidate, if you will. So even if ads that arguably fail to include the disclaimer, they're subject to immediate injunction. In seeking that to pull down the ad, it could be within days or weeks before an election. What would be the level of the evidence that would be sufficient to force this ad off the air, let's say?
It's clear and convincing.
Okay.
That's just the evidentiary standards that's been used in other injunctive relief cases for the state of Michigan.
So enough would be just if that injured candidate said, this makes it, if they made an allegation, just that would be sufficient?
So an allegation does not amount to clear and convincing evidence. There's I mean, clear and convincing evidence on its face is kind of, it has to be clear and convincing, and I don't have the definition of what that. I could potentially Google it right now, but an allegation certainly wouldn't amount to clear and convincing evidence. Maybe my colleague over here might do that as he's on his phone.
I've got fast. The evidence is highly and substantially more than likely to be true than untrue.
Right, and they would have to prove that in a court of law.
Okay. For the temporary restraining order?
For the injunctive relief.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I had a couple questions. This is a really complex issue, I think, is what something that I'm wondering. So I was just wondering if you could talk more about how these bills provide distinction between the ordinary citizen and political action committees and campaign committees, because I think we're talking about two different things, right? And I know that there's. I guess I'll just let you speak to it, but in my mind, I see that as, politicians and political actors intentionally misleading in elections as a really severe issue. Now, when we talk about Uncle Bob, per se, creating their own deepfake, et cetera, or a student somewhere, I think that might be different. So just in the bills, if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the distinction that's been made.
Sure. So the reason that we even keep person in here is because we want to avoid the scenario where we've got a campaign committee or perhaps a large organization or interest using a person to push out the content. Which is why in the original disclaimer bill, we use originally distribute instead of, for example, like just sharing something on the internet. So it's written in such a way that our intent is not to, penalize, again, a person in their basement who is forwarding things along. However, if you are, an adult with the ability to create these things and your intent is to put out misleading information, deceive voters, and affect the election outcome, then there are penalties for you. And the first penalty on the deepfakes would be a civil infraction. And then, obviously, after you've received that, you're aware that you're supposed to put a disclaimer, and it goes from there. So we want to discourage everyone from intending to mislead voters in elections. However, we certainly want to make sure that individual people are aware before criminalizing them.
Thank you. Then this might be weird, but just something to consider, because we're talking about, I guess, like the scope of reality with deepfakes is maybe working something in to where if someone puts a disclaimer on a video that's actually real, that should be something we consider as well. So like the reverse, right? So there's real video that opposing candidate puts a disclaimer saying that it's fake when it's not. That is just it's just something I thought about. Anyway, Representative, go ahead.
That's also misleading, and there's actually a lot of things that need to be addressed as we go forward in the AI universe that are not. Well, this package of bills, addresses, I think, what are the most pressing issues right now. But also, another question I explored is what about a positive deep fake? I mean, that could have an impact too. So there's a lot more that we can and should address as we go forward. But some of it's just outside of the particular scope of these bills. So I look forward to continuing, work on this as it grows and increases.
And
so thank you for that question.
The work has to start somewhere, so thank you for bringing this. Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what you guys are doing here because this is an issue that's on the horizon. It's here, but we're literally cresting that moment. And I think there's a lot we don't know, right? what kind of comes back into my mind as we talk about this is the old adage that we've all heard, which is, don't believe anything that you read and half of what you see, right? And that's kind of the old adage. But so I don't have a fundamental issue with the entirety of the package. I do see a couple of things that I think could create maybe some small issues, and I just want to ask a couple of quick questions if you'll allow that. So the way that I read the wording of this, particularly in 5141, Section 7, it says may apply to any of the following courts for injunctive relief against a person for violating this section, and then it lists Circuit Court of Ingham County, Circuit Court for the county which the party alleged violative act or practice resided, or the Circuit Court for the county in which the violation of this section could deceive. Does that allow myself, if I were the St. Clair County prosecutor, and somebody did this, would that allow me to petition the Ingham County Circuit Court for an injunctive relief?
That's a good question, and I don't know the exact answer to that. I mean, I know that the venue could be in the Ingham County Court for that, but I don't know if that would, I think you would probably work with the Attorney General's office if it was in the Ingham County Court, but again, I'm not 100% sure, and I can find you an answer on that.
If I may
well,
jump
well,
in.
there's an answer, I just don't know it.
Yeah, I think we found the answer. I think the language reads either of the following venues, so I think the injunction could happen in either.
Right. So the language would allow me, if I were solely elected within the boundaries of a circuit court district, it would actually allow me to go outside of my venue and go into the Ingham County Circuit Court for injunctive relief, which is a little bit contrary to the standards.
It's my understanding that Ingham County is often used just because it's the seat of the capital for Michigan.
Sure, but the injunctive relief I'm seeking is only the issue that is only occurring within my jurisdiction if I'm wholly elected within my county. It's not happening anywhere else. It's a little bit off of the standards.
Well, I understand
that's all
your
I'm
question.
saying.
You're saying
Yeah.
because it doesn't affect the state
Correct.
as a
It's
whole.
not a state. If I were a prosecutor and you were doing these and throwing them at me within my county, and then I said, well, in the industry, it's called venue shopping. Maybe I would have a little more sympathy in Ingham County than I would in St. Clair County, so I'm going to go to Ingham County. That's all I'm saying. I think that's something we need to look at. I understand if the Attorney General takes it up, right, because of the statewide implication perhaps, or perhaps it's an individual who is outside of the state, or perhaps it's an individual we don't know who that person is, right? So the AG would then take it up to get the injunctive relief, perhaps to tell Facebook to take it down because we don't know who put it out, right? But to allow a candidate within a county to move outside of their county for injunctive relief, I think is just a little bit outside of the typical standards, that's all.
You can still have a change of venue if you feel that for some reason you can't be properly represented in your own county. So, I mean, it's not atypical to offer,
Well, but that's a
Ingham as
petition in a
venue.
court to the judge to allow for that to happen. It's not a statute that says that I can just arbitrarily go to Ingham County to get relief. That's all I'm saying. I think we need to look at that, that's all.
That's duly noted, and we'll be happy to look into, why that was specifically written.
Yep.
that
So
way.
is there means, and this is a pure question of ignorance, is there means by which that we can determine that it is AI? You know what I mean? As opposed to, that's not me, right? Because
This
could we
would be
create
a-
that defense, right?
would-
Could we create a defense of that's not me? You know what I
This
mean?
would be an excellent question for the AI expert.
Okay. One more simple one, if I may.
I think that's exactly the point, though.
Litigation, yeah.
No, I actually agree. I'm just saying, we need to be able to be definitive if we're going to make things a felony or a crime, right? That's all I'm saying. I think for that's really what I have for now, Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, with that, and there being no further questions, the committee will now go at ease.
Thank you. The Elections Committee will come back to order. We will now have virtual testimony from Robert Weissman, who is the president of Public Citizen. Welcome, Mr. Weissman.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We are prepared to hear your testimony on House Bills 5141 through 5145.
Well, very good, and thank you so much for having me today and tolerating me appearing virtually. I can't really prove it, I guess, but I promise you that I'm a live human being and not an avatar or any generated thing from artificial intelligence. My name is Robert Weissman. I'm president of Public Citizen. We're a consumer advocacy and democracy advocacy group based in Washington, D.C. We have about 500,000 members and supporters nationwide, including many thousands in the state of Michigan. I'm testifying in support today of the package of bills that have been introduced. I want to appreciate you all for introducing this, being leaders in the country, and tackling what I think is a very serious problem that everyone in the country and around the world is going to have to face going forward. I heard much of the conversation that preceded my testimony, and so I thought I would not go over my prepared remarks, but just offer a few comments, then try to help figure out any questions that you all may have if I'm able to do that. The first thing that I think is worth emphasizing is that although deepfakes are not yet prevalent in American politics, they have been used, and I think it's a near certainty that they will become prevalent absent intervention from legislators in Michigan and around the country. We're seeing an uptick already in elections. I think, as was earlier mentioned, they were very prominently, maybe decisively used in Slovakian elections that were just concluded, and they're increasingly prevalent around the internet, not in the political context. Second point is to underscore the importance of establishing laws, standards, and norms around this. In the absence of your action on this legislation, using deepfakes is permissible. So it's not as if you're establishing some new penalty on top of an already existing prohibition. It is permissible. And I think it would be foolish, and you all know this from your own personal experience, it would be foolish to assume that political operatives will not use technologies and tools that are available to them if they are legal to do so. If they are not legal, I think most people, most committees, most corporations will follow the law. So as important as the enforcement questions are, the most important thing is to establish the standard, as this package of legislation does. Deepfakes not permitted in political activity around elections without an appropriate disclosure. Third thing to be said is, along with the likely scenario of deepfakes being used and maybe decisively used immediately before an election period, if deepfakes are prevalent or just part of the political and broader culture, candidates and others will use the idea of deepfakes to deny things that actually did happen. So I think one of you commented on just the unreality and the challenge of knowing what's real, which is already actually a problem pre-deepfakes. But if we enter a world of deepfakes without strong rules guiding their use, I think it'll be very, very difficult for voters to distinguish what is real and not real, almost impossible, and forcing them into the worst kind of tribalism as the only way to try to make sense of the world. So again, very important, I think, to take proactive action on these questions. I guess one comment on the, one thing before getting into the bills themselves. I think, there are many challenges that AI is going to impose on society, hopefully many great opportunities, but for sure many challenges. Some of them are not easily addressed, or they're incredibly complicated, and it's not really clear what the way forward is. In this area, we're lucky that although the risks are severe, there is a very obvious remedy. It's a non-intrusive remedy of disclosure. So we're not proposing you're not proposing this legislation to actually ban the use of deepfakes, even deceptive deepfakes, just saying you can't use this uniquely deceptive and fraudulent technology without disclosing that you're doing so. Now, sometimes disclosure doesn't do that much, but in this case, disclosure cures the fraud. It enables people to assess the media for what it is. If it still communicates something to them, that's fine, but they'll know that it was generated by artificial intelligence and does not represent something that was actually said or actually took place. Then looking at the legislation itself and just saying a word about the enforcement system, which again, super important as you all are highlighting, important to make sure there's no inadvertent or inadvertently absent enforcement, but also to underscore just how important it is to establish the standard first off, apart from enforcement, that deepfakes without disclosures are impermissible. That said, I think the way to think about the enforcement system is that there are two tiers. One tier is focused on establishing the prohibition. So it is illegal to use a deceptive deepfake as defined and without a disclosure as defined in the legislation, and is subject to penalties. Now, those penalties break out into two different ways. So there are tougher penalties for political committees and political actors. There are much gentler penalties for the Uncle Bob scenario you were talking about. I do think it's important that there are penalties for individuals and an actual firm prohibition for individuals. It was only a few months ago that some random person created a deepfake photo of the Pentagon being bombed or exploding. That tanked the stock market for about 30 minutes by several, I think a couple thousand points. So a random thing from a random person can be hugely impactful. And I think it would be a mistake to not cover those people, but we should also recognize the need to do that in a different way than the more engaged political actors. And I think the legislation does that. The second tier of the legislation deals with this issue of preliminary injunctions without any penalty, but just giving the Attorney General or the affected party the ability to stop an ad or communication from continuing to be aired. I can't speak with any expertise on the jurisdictional issues in the state of Michigan, but I think important to not just say we're going to have a criminal prohibition or a civil prohibition on the use of this, but that the affected parties have the ability to act to order that ads that are created by deceptive deepfakes be taken down. And the last comment, just to highlight one of the points that was raised at the end of your conversation, that there are 4 states already that have adopted anti-deepfake, political deepfake legislation. I think those were properly listed: Texas, Washington State, California, and Minnesota. There are a variety of federal bills that have been introduced, and we're working on those. They're including the bipartisan measures that we think have some reasonable chance of passing with all recognition of some of the dysfunction in getting legislation passed in Washington, D.C. Along with Michigan, I think there are at least 3 states that have bills that are now already introduced, and I think probably a dozen more that are likely to introduce bills and I think pass them by at least the beginning or the early part of next year. So you're simultaneously a leader and moving forward on this, but you're also leading a group that's of states and the federal government that I think is recognizing this problem as you do and eager to take action. Very much appreciate the work that you're doing, your leadership on this, and the opportunity to talk to you, and happy to try to help clarify anything if I may be able to.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. Do any of the committee members have questions for Mr. Weissman? And first, I'm just going to go ahead and say, can you share with us your experience, with artificial intelligence and this field, so that we all kind of know where you're coming from, just like your credentials?
Sure. Well, I run this organization, Public Citizen. As I mentioned, we work on democracy issues. We've been doing this for 50 years. I've been the president of the organization for 14 years. I'm an attorney trained at Harvard Law School. We have focused deeply on campaign finance, access to the ballot, and election administration issues for many decades. We've also worked on technology issues for a lesser period of time, about 7 or 8 years, and recognized with this sort of new immersion of generative AI, the profound threats that it causes for elections. And we're working on actually artificial intelligence issues across many other sectors, but with a very special focus right now on democracy issues. So we've been involved in both studying the issue and trying to develop legislative and policy proposals to deal with these problems. We're advising legislators and government officials in the federal government and in many states across the country right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Representative DeBoyer has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, you may or may not know this because I did ask it. Is there a means by which we can definitively, technologically make a determination if something is generated in AI? And can that be diluted, meaning between copies and screen recordings, and like where does that technology reside? Because if I'm going to go to court to make a claim that video that has been generated is false, like what is my definitive, technologically, what's my definitive ability to do that?
Yeah, I think that's fluid. I think as a legal matter, the first thing is, as you as the victim would have reason to know that it's a fake. Not something that casts you in a bad light, but shows you saying something that you didn't know. And that, your knowledge would be the basis for moving forward. And your knowledge would be, as a legal matter, highly relevant evidence in the case. Of course, there's a defense from the other side, but the other side would have to, if they had created a deepfake, even before we get to the technology of it, they could lie, but we would assume that a party would not lie in court. And it is a pretty clear up or down question. Either you used AI technology or you didn't. Now, as a technological matter, it's fluid. There's sort of two ways to look at it. One is, can you just externally evaluate a piece of media to determine whether or not it's a deep fake? And by and large, now the answer is yes. Experts can, and often you as just a layperson can make that determination. The quality of audio is highest right now, as I think you heard with that Biden audio, and sometimes difficult, but experts can usually distinguish it. Images and video are not as high quality, and just from viewing it, experts are usually, and often even lay people, are usually able to make the determination. How long that persists, just from an external viewing point or listening point, is a little unclear because the technology is for sure improving very quickly. There's a separate way to analyze this, which is sort of looking at the code and underlying a piece of content. And there are issues about whether these various forms of media will embed indications that they are generated by AI. You may have heard the term watermarking, which actually is a little bit misleading because it doesn't typically mean what we think about with a watermark in a piece of paper. It's not really a visual watermark, but it's a code embedded in the content that would be readable by a machine or by a computer analyst. So some of the major platforms or producers of media are either doing that or proposing to do that. There's not a single unified standard for that. And it will be important, I think, in the years ahead. But in the near term, I think it remains very feasible to distinguish AI, at least if you're relying on computer experts who can closely evaluate a particular piece of content.
Well, I think just the basis on my question was, at the end of the day, if I go to court, I have to have something reasonably definitive to prove that my position that that's false is accurate. And just a follow-up question, which you may or may not have the answer to, is, do we have any reason to believe that there may not be a motivation of a politician to make a claim that something is untrue when it indeed is true, and perhaps seek injunction, at least in those last few days before an election? It's disinformation by a foreign nation, perhaps, something like that.
well, anything is possible. Bringing a bad faith claim in court has its own consequences. And the threshold for this is not that something is untrue. It's that it has to be untruthfully depicted by using a deepfake. So, if I'm running against candidate Jones, I can say anything I want about what candidate Jones thinks, says, and does. I can say, per one of your early examples raised, that candidate Jones eats golden retrievers. I just can't show candidate Jones falsely themselves saying that they do that. So yeah, it would be possible for someone to bring a bad faith claim. A bad faith claim would be a very bad faith claim. So I think you'd be subject to very serious sanctions as a legal matter, and I think you may have political consequences that are pretty ugly for you too, bringing a claim that you knew to be untrue about a deepfake.
Well, I would say that sanctions are generally not something in the local circuit court that are granted on a regular basis on these kinds of issues. They are at the federal level much more often. But I do think that there's much more in these bills than just the video depiction. There is audio, there's phone calls, there's multiple things that could pose a circumstance, if I'm a candidate and did say it, to make a claim that I didn't. That's all my point is there. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative DeBoyer. We also have a question from Representative Wagella.
Hi, thank you for testifying today. This is an area where I am learning a lot about still. I think we all are. And I think luckily we're in a place where most people can, the technology is not good enough for us not to be able to tell that it's fake. But that being said, do you know anything about how hard is it to track down the origin, right? And the creator? And I think that's an interesting point of discussion, because I think the really bad actors that we're going to see in the future could be in other countries, could be, creating these in a way that it designs it to be hard to figure out that they created it. And then some of our people like Uncle Bob, if you'll say it, it's a funny little analogy we have here, might not be hiding they're the creator of this, yet still face some of the consequences of it. I just wondering if you could talk about that. How hard is it to actually figure out the origin, and if you know anything with that? And if we should have any legislation in regards to foreign countries interfering with our elections, if there's anything we can do at the state level.
Yeah, the bill is not going to solve all problems. And no technology is going to solve all problems created by this new set of technologies. So right now, without that kind of watermarking system, or the term of art is establishment of provenance built in to most video, you can't track where it originally came from. You may be able to use certain kinds of techniques to do it, but generally not. However, even if it became the standard that provenance was built in, it was watermarked in the way we're talking about, it's highly likely that people will develop technologies outside of the mainstream technologies, sharing them on the dark web and so on. We're seeing this in very frightful ways with the use of AI and creation of porn, which is involving sort of underground technologies that are pretty good, pretty effective. So it's not impossible that, or it's likely actually that there'll be ways to evade it if you're really an evil actor. Two things I wanted to say about that. One is, again, to come back to the point I made earlier, I think right now it's legal. These things are legal, and we should expect them to be widespread. So we don't have to worry about only the most evil actors we can imagine. We should assume that political actors will use them pretty generally, unless there's a prohibition put in place about it, which is why I think the legislation is so important. And then second, in the case of Uncle Bob, it's one thing if Uncle Bob creates a deepfake video. It's another if Uncle Bob forwards one, not knowing that it was a deepfake video. And as I read the legislation, in that case, we wish Uncle Bob didn't do that, but he's not going to be restricted by the legislation. On the other hand, if Uncle Bob does know that it was a deep fake that's not properly labeled, then he would not be permitted to distribute it around the time of an election.
I have just a quick follow up. Have you seen in other states any legislation that deals with social media companies or other media companies knowing that there are deepfakes out there that maybe couldn't be traced to the original creator, but still allowing those on the platform? Have you seen anything along those lines that we should enact? And then kind of circling back to Uncle Bob, have there any consideration for going up again, for us having regulations in on the software companies themselves and how they would allow this to potentially be used in political manners? Just two questions.
On the states, obviously, there's a lot of legislation on the platforms. I don't know. I do not believe that any of the 4 states have legislation that specifically focuses the attention on the platforms as regards deepfakes. And I think, and I'd have to give this a closer review, I think doing that would run into some problems with federal preemption under the 230 protection from for liability for the platforms. That said, Google has announced for YouTube that it will not permit deepfake videos to be used as advertisements, political advertisements. I think other companies are going to follow that, and I can tell you that we're going to press them to adopt similar kinds of standards. And I'm sorry, I lost track of your second question, which is again on our friend Uncle Bob.
I think you kind of answered mine. I'll retract my second question. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. So thank you for being here and for your efforts to assist us with this very new space that we're working in. Thank you for your testimony. And we are now going to have testimony from Ricky Bicknell from Voters Not Politicians. Welcome, Mr. Bicknell. I believe it is in support of the bill package.
Thank you, Chair Cernoglu and distinguished members of House Elections Committee. I am Ricky Cervantes Bicknell, Government Affairs Manager representing Voters Not Politicians. Today, we are gathered to discuss 5 bills that comprise a bipartisan 21st century solution that addresses the growing threat posed by AI deepfake political advertising. One of the most potent and sinister anti-democratic efforts currently employed by malign actors includes the proliferation of intentionally false information. This kind of disinformation presents an ongoing threat to democratic institutions. And one of the newest additions to the disinformation toolkit is the AI deepfake political advertisement. As defined by Merriam-Webster, deepfakes are audio or video representations produced with artificial intelligence that convincingly portray a real person performing an action that did not occur, and that a reasonable person would otherwise believe to be an authentic representation. This kind of disinformation, content that is intended to be false, is a threat to our democracy, presenting voters with images, audio, and/or video that appears so real that a reasonable person could be persuaded. This package of bills, HB 5141 through 5145, introduced by Chair Cernoglu, Representative Arbit, and Representative Bierlein, would require a disclaimer on political advertisements that contain audio, images, or video that were generated using AI, and create penalties for trying to use deepfakes to deceive and influence voters close to an election within 90 days. Similar legislation is passed in large, diverse states like California and Texas, and in more moderate-sized states like Minnesota and Washington. And I believe in Minnesota, it passed with near unanimous support, all but one person in the legislature voting in favor. HB 5141 through 5145 would place Michigan at the front of the pack of states working on regulation of AI deepfakes in political advertising. Voters Not Politicians, Michigan's leading grassroots pro-democracy organization, supports this much-needed bipartisan legislation and calls for urgent passage. AI deepfake technology poses a clear and urgent threat to Michigan's democracy and to our elections. Bad actors can use this widely available technology to deceive voters and influence elections through disinformation and outright lies. If lawmakers do not act to protect voters now, AI deepfakes and disinformation will become a much bigger threat in the upcoming 2024 election cycle. Voters, Not Politicians, fully supports HB 5141 through 5145, bills that will protect voters from undue influence of disinformation and deception, and we're hoping to see it move quickly through the legislature with strong bipartisan support. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bicknell. Do we have any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony. We also have Erin Shore from the Michigan Department of State to testify in support of the bill. Welcome, Ms. Shore.
Thank you, Chair Cerniglu. Thank you, committee members. I almost hesitate to be here because, like Rep. Wagella, I'm very much learning about this technology. I think my 13-year-old nephew has done more with AI than I have. So any technical questions should go back to Mr. Weissman. But we are happy to be here. I am happy to be here as the department in support of House Bills 41 through 45. I think this is the first of several conversations we're likely to have because we know that disclaimers alone are not likely to be the only answer as we think through the implications of this new technology. But as we've alluded, Michigan law already works very hard to ensure that our voters are informed, whether that's working through the process of the 100-word summary of a ballot question or putting those paid for by disclaimers so we know who's behind other types of speech. And I think what's envisioned in these bills very much fits in with that line of thinking of making sure that voters are making informed decisions. These technologies are not new. We have long had the capability to alter photos and graphics and whatnot. I was dating myself talking to Alex the other day when I was remembering the movie Contact and how it featured President Clinton talking about something and people were aghast that he hadn't actually said this, but they had it in the movie. But with AI, we know that kind of capability is far more available, far more capable, and far cheaper than it has ever been. So the time is now, if not before now, to address these questions. To a couple of Rep. DeBoyer's questions, we are thankful at the Bureau that the bills are structured the way they are. While we are capable of enforcing whether a communication has a disclaimer or not, we do not have experts in this kind of technology. Nor do we expect that we will have those kinds of experts, so we do think the courts are the right venue for determining whether a violation has taken place or not. Certainly, I hear the sponsors willing to work on it. My understanding, and this has come up in a couple of different bills, both this and some others, is that in listing a specific court, there is sometimes a desire to develop a court with expertise on a particular set of issues. And so that could have been one of the reasons that the Ingham Court was chosen, but certainly we defer to the sponsors in terms of what the appropriate venue is. And I think just to the question of whether something could be brought frivolously, you would have to convince a court that not only should they grant injunctive relief, but that they should do so in a very timely manner that could potentially affect the election. You know, we've been lucky, certainly as we've had cases that go to the Supreme Court level, they have always acted very expeditiously when we've needed them to. But we do know our courts are quite busy with a variety of other cases, so I would expect that you would have to make a convincing case to get the court to take something up before the election, but certainly we can't rule that out either. So I'm happy to take questions to the extent that they are not technical about AI, and we appreciate your consideration of these bills.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. Just, are you the lead agency on this, or is it the AG's office? I don't know if this would be the right question here or not, but there is a criminal piece to this.
Mm-hmm.
What about outside of our state, are we going to get into that whole extradition of people who do this and violate it and create the content outside of Michigan? Because the reality is, there is no borders when it comes to this, right? It's coming from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear, You know, are we going to take an active role in going after an individual from Texas, perhaps, that created this, to bring them back here and charge them with criminal intent or criminal activity? I don't know if you know that answer or what your opinion may be on that.
I would defer to someone who's an attorney. I suspect it probably depends on the nature of the case. If we had foreign actors getting involved, for example, that likely would be in a federal election that probably is activity taking place in multiple states, where that would rise above something that was going to our state courts. But it could be, certainly we have seen cases where there are state and federal election cases moving at the same time based on different grounds, with the hope to catch an actor on one of those successfully. So I think all of those options would be on the table depending on how egregious an action was.
Thank you, Representative DeBoyer. And thank you, Ms. Shore, for your testimony. I just want to note, in regards to lead agency, we are determining that right now, and this was entirely driven by myself and Representative Bierlein, the initial moving forward. So it was not specifically requested by an agency, but we will have a lead agency coming soon. So we also have a card in opposition from Sherry Ritchie, not wishing to speak in opposition to the bill package. And just to note, in answer to, I think, a lot of the questions asked, certainly this legislation or any legislation can address all bad actors wishing to commit a crime. However, as was stated and reiterating, there is currently no law prohibiting deepfakes or other misleading content at all. So even a person or campaign committee who wants to follow the law can do this and feel like they are not breaking the law. And I think that a lot of times as campaigns get carried away, they will do a lot of things to win that election if it is not illegal to do so. So putting some guardrails on that hopefully will make a noticeable impact. And I think we can all agree, no matter who we are, on which side of the aisle that we sit, that we don't want things put out there that we didn't do and we didn't say, and we may have very different opinions on a lot of things, but we want voters to know our opinions and not what someone else is falsely or maliciously putting forward on us. So thank you again for the testimony and cards today. We are now, okay. So Representative Hope makes a motion to report, oh wait, I want to note one other quick thing as we move forward, since this is a very new space, the bill sponsors continue to be open to, improvements, amendments, substitutes, so that this legislation can reflect the will of our body as a whole. So Representative Hope makes a motion to report HB 5141 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Hope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. HB 5141, support a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Colazar makes a motion to report HB 5142 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Hope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. HB 5142 is report a recommendation.
Representative Wagella makes a motion to report HB 5143 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Hope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. HB 5143 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Burns makes a motion to report HB 5144 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. HB 5144 is reported with recommendation.
Representative Churches makes a motion to report HB 5145 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. HB 5145 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.